I'm pregnant, she said, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, but she forced it out anyway. But I need a DNA test to confirm if it's yours or Samuel's. For a moment, everything around me stopped moving. The ceiling fan kept spinning, but I couldn't hear a thing. It felt like the air had thickened, like the room itself wanted to swallow her words before they reached me. But it was too late. They were already buried under my skin. I didn't throw the chair, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't even blink. I just leaned back, nodded slowly, and said, "No issue." She stared at me, waiting for an explosion that never came. That's the thing about real betrayal. It doesn't always make you scream. Sometimes it leaves you quiet, too quiet. Inside me, something cracked clean in two. I felt it. Not loud like a gunshot, but sharp like glass breaking in a dark room. I watched her shift in her seat, nervous, twisting her fingers like she wanted to rewind time. But I'd already seen the truth behind her eyes. I smiled, not out of kindness, but the kind of smile you give when you know a storm is already forming and you're not planning to run. I wasn't going to beg her to choose me. I wasn't going to fight Samuel. I was going to let the truth do what anger couldn't. She thought my silence was weakness. She didn't know it was the beginning of the end. Welcome back, my friend. If this is your first time here, I'm truly glad you found your way to this corner of the internet, where an old man shares the kind of stories life doesn't always let you forget. My voice may be older, a little slower, but these stories are carved deep into the bones. And tonight, I want to take you into one that tested everything I believed about love, trust, and quiet strength. Life has a way of teaching lessons long after the noise fades. And sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who pull the ground from beneath your feet without warning. I don't share these moments to make anyone pity me, but to remind you that silence is not weakness, age is not irrelevance, and heartbreak doesn't have to end you. It can shape you. Tell me in the comments, has anyone ever dismissed you because of your age, because they thought your silence meant you didn't matter? I ask that because I know what it feels like to be underestimated, to be looked at like your voice is too quiet to be heard. But here, your voice matters, just as mine does, and together we hold these stories like pieces of truth that no one can take away. From the outside, we look like a picture that belonged in a frame, the kind of couple people smiled at in passing. She was the woman everyone adored. Warm smile, soft laugh. A voice that could turn a crowded room quiet without even trying. To our neighbors, we were the couple that hosted small Sunday lunches, who waved from the porch, who looked like we had it all figured out. People would say things like, "You two are perfect together," and I'd nod, pretending I couldn't feel the cracks forming underneath every compliment. My children liked her. That was the hard part. She made sure of it. She never forgot their birthdays, but always made their favorite meals when they visited, always knew exactly what to say to make them think she was the woman who'd hold the family together. And for a long time, I believed that too. I trusted what I saw more than what I felt. Because feelings are easy to bury when everyone around you keeps calling your life beautiful. Then there were the in-laws, her family. Polished smiles, perfect manners, people who acted like we were one big happy family. They'd sit at the dining table, clinking their glasses, telling me how lucky I was to have someone like her. I'd nod, because what else could I do? You don't shout, "She's changing," when everyone's applauding. You stay quiet. You hope you're just imagining it. Even the neighbors had their share of stories. They saw us taking walks in the evening, hand in hand, never hearing the silence between us. They saw me mowing the lawn while she laughed on the phone, never wondering who was on the other end. They saw the shell, never the storm. That's how betrayal works. It doesn't always announce itself. It hides behind laughter. It wears a smile, and it grows quietly in the places no one bothers to look. On the surface, I was the lucky man. But underneath, I was the man slowly watching the walls of his house lean in, whispering that something wasn't right. I think what cuts the deepest isn't just the lie itself. It's everything you gave before the lie was spoken. Long before those words left her lips, I'd spent years building a life around her smile, brick by brick, believing love was something solid. I sold the last piece of land my father left me, the farm I grew up on, to buy this house. Not a big house, but warm, with a porch wide enough for rocking chairs and quiet sunsets. I wanted it to feel like a forever kind of place. I still remember signing the papers with her hand resting on mine. Back then, that touch meant safety. Now, it feels like a ghost pressing against my skin. I worked overtime for years to make sure she never wanted for anything. I put her name on the deed, without blinking. I told myself love meant trust, trust meant security, and security meant I could rest easy knowing I had chosen right. That porch wasn't just wood and nails. It was years of sacrifice. It was the sound of my children's laughter, her soft voice calling my name, the quiet mornings when I believed nothing could break us. She'd lean against that porch railing and tell me how safe she felt with me, and I'd believe it. Every time. I even rewrote my will to make sure she would be taken care of if anything happened to me. My lawyer raised a brow when I told him she'd inherit everything. But I trusted her more than I trusted the air in my lungs. That's what makes betrayal so cruel. It doesn't just take what's in front of you. It reaches back into every moment you loved and stains it. Every nail I hammered into this house was a promise. Every fence post I planted was a vow. Every night we sat out here, listening to the crickets hum, I thought I was building something unshakable. But what I didn't know then was that a storm was already forming beneath the floorboards, quiet and patient, waiting for its day to split everything open. And now, every time I look at this house, I don't see a home anymore. I see my trust built into its walls, and I see exactly where it cracked. It wasn't a screaming match or a slammed door that gave me the first sting. It was a quiet moment, the kind of moment people would have overlooked if they weren't the ones standing in it. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, just the two of us. I had spent the whole day fixing the broken fence outside, the one that kept the garden safe. Sweat still clung to the back of my neck. I remember reaching for a glass of water when she said it, soft, careless, like it didn't matter. Samuel would have finished that in half the time, she laughed, not even looking at me. Just a small line. Just a small joke. At least that's how she meant it. But it landed like a blade between my ribs. My hand tightened on the glass, but I didn't let it break. I didn't say a word. I smiled the way men smile when they've been taught to swallow pain without making a scene. But inside, I felt it, that quiet, invisible tear in the fabric of everything I'd built. She didn't notice, or maybe she did, and didn't care. She went back to scrolling on her phone, the blue glow lighting up her face like nothing had happened. And I sat there, hearing her words over and over in my head. Not because Samuel mattered, but because she said his name so easily, so comfortably, like it had already found a home in our house. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was being sensitive. But the truth is, the first wound is always small. Small enough for you to pretend it didn't happen. But I felt it burn. I memorized the exact tone of her voice, the way her mouth curved, the way she didn't even glance at me. I swallowed it whole that night. I didn't know it then, but I just started collecting the pieces of a storm I'd soon face alone. After that night, it was never just one thing. It was a series of little cuts, the kind that don't bleed much at first but leave you aching long after. She started changing the way she spoke to me. It wasn't sudden, it was slow, like water wearing down a rock. At dinner, she'd roll her eyes when I asked a simple question. She'd sigh loudly when I didn't move fast enough. And when friends came over, she'd make little comments that made me sound old, weak, or slow. Everyone laughed, even I forced a smile. But every word she threw was a match against dry wood. I remember one night, my son came by with his family. We were at the table, and she leaned in, voice sweet as sugar, and said, "You know, this house would be worth a fortune if we sold it. Samuel knows a realtor who could make it happen fast." The room went quiet. My son looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing my face crack. I just placed my fork down slowly and said, "This house isn't just a number on paper." She smirked like she already owned the walls around us. Another time I came home early from town and caught her on the phone. She didn't see me at first. I heard her laugh, that soft, easy laugh I used to think belonged to me. But it wasn't the sound that broke something in me. It was the way she whispered Samuel's name, like it had become part of her breathing. When she noticed me, she fumbled the phone, forcing a fake smile. She said it was just business. But lies have a smell, they linger. And that one stayed with me for days. Slowly, she stopped asking. She started taking, moving things around the house like it was already hers alone. She spoke of plans I hadn't agreed to. She pushed me to sell the farm equipment, my old tools, even the rocking chair on the porch. That chair was the last thing my father built with his hands. She said it made the house look too old. I didn't answer her. I just stared at the wood grain and remembered the man who taught me how to build something worth keeping. The worst part wasn't her words. It was the way she acted, like I'd already stepped aside, like I was the guest in my own house. I kept quiet, not because I was blind, but because I was watching. Every insult, every greedy glance, every late-night call. I gathered them like puzzle pieces, even though I didn't know yet what picture they would form. All I knew was that something was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't be gentle. I used to believe that silence in a house meant peace. Lately, it's meant something else entirely. A different kind of silence. One that creeps into corners, carries secrets in its teeth, and sits heavy on your chest. At first, it was just whispers. The kind you can barely catch when you walk into a room too quietly. Her voice, soft and low, but sharper than a knife in the dark. I'd catch the tail end of sentences like, "He won't notice," or "It's almost ready." I'd clear my throat as I entered, and she'd smile too quickly, like she'd been caught in a lie she thought I wouldn't question. Then things started to shift. Real things. I'd kept a small box tucked away in the drawer of my desk. Old legal documents, farm sale papers, copies of the deed to the house. Nothing fancy, just the story of everything I'd worked for. One night, I opened it and found a few papers missing. I checked again and again, hoping I'd just misplaced them, but they were gone. She said maybe I'd forgotten where I put them. I never forget where I put the pieces of my life. Money too. Not a fortune, but enough to sting. A withdrawal here, a transfer there. Little amounts at first, like someone testing how far they can stretch a lie before it snaps. When I asked her casually, she brushed it off with a laugh, said she'd handle the bills now. I let her think I believed her. She started taking late calls in the hallway, away from the living room. Whispering. Always whispering. And every time I stepped closer, the whispers died like a candle snuffed out too fast. That's the thing about secrets. They're loudest in silence. One night, I walked past the kitchen and saw a stack of unfamiliar envelopes tucked under a placemat. My name wasn't on them, hers was. But the logo stamped on the corner? A lawyer's office. I didn't touch them. Not yet. I just stood there staring at the sharp black ink, feeling something cold settle behind my ribs. She didn't know I'd seen. And I didn't tell her. I started to notice how she moved around me. Like someone who's already rehearsing a goodbye, they're too afraid to say out loud. She wore new perfume, spoke softer when she got calls, smiled like she had a secret I wasn't meant to be part of. And I knew, in the way a man knows the weight of his own house, that whatever was coming wasn't just about a baby. It was bigger. I didn't go looking for proof right away. I let the whispers pile up. I let the missing papers breathe. Because when the truth comes on its own, it hits harder. And something told me it was already on its way. The proof didn't come crashing down like a wave. It slipped into my hands quietly, like a whisper that had been waiting for the right night. I still remember it clear as the crack in old wood. It was late, past midnight. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, phone still glowing in her hand. I moved like an old shadow across the room. Not to snoop, not to search, just to breathe in the silence that used to belong to me. But silence has a way of showing you what it's been hiding. There was a folder peeking out from her bag by the coffee table. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe a man always knows when the house he built is about to betray him. I slid it out slowly, careful not to wake her. Inside were legal documents I'd never seen. A property valuation of this house. My house. A signed consultation form from a lawyer's office with both her name and Samuel's. And tucked between the pages was a printed message thread, her words, not mine, discussing how to finalize the transfer once things were settled. My name sat in those lines like a ghost, something they'd already written out of the story. I read every word without blinking. every number, every line. My heart didn't race. It didn't even ache the way I thought it would. It just stilled, like a man who's been watching rain build up in the clouds and finally sees the lightning flash. That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't about doubt. It wasn't about a baby. This was about everything I owned, everything I built. On the last page there was a signature line, mine, forged in a handwriting that tried too hard to look familiar. I didn't speak. I didn't slam the folder shut. I just stared at it long enough to burn it into memory. Then I pulled out the small recorder I keep in my drawer, the same one I used years ago for work calls, and pressed record. I whispered the date, the time, what I saw. Then I slipped the recorder and those papers into a locked box beneath the floorboard of my study. She stirred on the couch, mumbled something soft, the kind of sleepy sound people make when they still believe their lies are safe. I stood there watching her. Not with hate, not even anger, just a cold, still silence. The kind of silence that waits. I didn't confront her. I didn't breathe a word. Because sometimes, when people think you know nothing, they show you everything. You know, when you hold the truth in your hands, everything around you suddenly looks different. The walls, the floor, even the air. It's strange how quiet betrayal can be. I remember standing there that night, holding those papers, and feeling the weight of it settle into my bones. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just let the silence do the talking. But let me ask you something, because I want to hear from you, not just speak at you. If it were your house, your trust, your life in those pages, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them right there, shaking the lies loose with your voice? Or would you have stayed silent, holding your cards close until the right moment? Tell me down in the comments. I want to know how your heart would have carried a truth like that. The boiling point didn't come in a dark alley or some heated screaming match. It came under bright hospital lights, too clean, too quiet. She'd booked the DNA appointment for a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the world outside looks normal, while yours is twisting into something unrecognizable. I sat there in that waiting room, hands folded on my knees, watching her pace back and forth like a woman rehearsing lines she didn't want to say out loud. Samuel was there too, not beside her, but close enough to stain the air. His shoes tapped against the tile like a clock ticking in my ear. I could feel their nervous energy bouncing off the walls, like they'd built a plan they thought I couldn't see through. She whispered to him when she thought I wasn't listening. They didn't realize I'd spent months living with their whispers already. When the nurse finally called us in, she grabbed my arm like she had the right to. Like this was still ours. I let her. Not because I wanted her touch, but because calm cuts deeper than rage. The doctor asked us to sit, explain the procedure in that polished, practiced tone people use when they've seen too many families pretending to be okay. I didn't say a word. I just watched her face. Her jaw was tight. Her hands shook. The moment the swab touched my mouth, I caught Samuel watching me, not with guilt, with arrogance. Like he was already standing in a house that wasn't his. Like he'd already buried me alive inside my own silence. I could feel the heat in my chest, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing it rise. I just stared back, steady, the way a man does when he's seen enough to know that silence is its own kind of power. After it was done, she leaned close and whispered, "No matter what happens, we can make this work." The words rolled off her tongue like a lie she'd practiced too many times. I didn't flinch. I didn't answer. Because in that room, I wasn't the broken man she thought I was. I was the quiet storm she hadn't planned for. They thought this appointment was their chance to corner me, to push me out of the story I built with my own hands. What they didn't know was that I already had the truth locked beneath my floorboards, and I'd been waiting for this exact moment. So I sat there calm, silent, steady, because when liars feel safe, they reveal everything. The room was too still when the doctor stepped in, holding that thin folder like it weighed more than the building itself. She sat across from me, eyes flicking between the three of us. Her voice was calm, professional, but you could hear the kind of tone people use when they're about to drop a stone into still water. "The preliminary results are back," she said. She glanced at me first, then at her. "The child is biologically his." Her hand tightened on the armrest. Samuel shifted in his chair like a man who'd just lost a bet he thought he'd already won. She forced a smile, but her voice cracked when she whispered, "See, I told you it was fine." But the doctor wasn't finished. "There's something else," she said. Her fingers tapped the folder lightly. "We found a rare hereditary marker, something specific, something that can only come from the father's side. It's genetic." That's when her smile dropped, like someone had pulled the floor from beneath her. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there watching her face turn from practiced confidence to something else entirely, fear. She glanced at Samuel like maybe he'd help, but he was already pulling away. 1 inch, then another. He wasn't the type to stand in the fire with someone. I'd seen it in his eyes from the beginning. He looked like a man who just realized the story he thought he controlled wasn't his to tell anymore. And me? I sat there steady, hands folded on my lap, breathing slow. I didn't need to say a word because the truth had started doing the talking for me. That one sentence from the doctor was a small crack in their wall. Just a hint of what I'd been holding on to in silence. They didn't know about the forged papers, the recordings, the lawyer's letters hidden beneath my floorboards. They didn't know that I already knew. She turned to me with a trembling voice. This doesn't change anything," she said, like if she said it fast enough, it might be true. But her eyes betrayed her. They flicked to Samuel again, searching for someone to steady her. No one did. That was the moment I saw it. The first real fear. Not the kind that comes from guilt. The kind that comes from realizing the story is slipping out of your hands. I leaned back just a little and met her eyes without blinking. I didn't have to speak. Not yet, because the loudest blow is the one they never hear coming. I've lived long enough to know that truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. It just needs the right moment to breathe. And that moment came like a door closing softly. Not loud, just final. She was still trying to convince herself that everything was fine, clutching the edge of her seat like a lifeline, when I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I placed a small black recorder on the table, the kind people forget even exists. I didn't press play right away. I just let it sit there, quiet and heavy. Samuel shifted again, trying to read my face. She stared at it like she already knew what was inside. Then, without a word, I pressed the button. Her own voice filled the room. Every whisper she thought the walls had swallowed. Her talking to Samuel. Her laughing about how easy it would be to move the old man out. To sell the house once the baby situation was sorted. Her exact words. Cold, clear, every lie stripped of its disguise. Samuel went pale. The doctor stiffened in her chair. And she looked like the ground had opened beneath her. Then I pulled out a single folded envelope, cream paper, stamped and dated. My updated will. I'd rewritten it the week I found those forged documents. She had no idea. I placed it on the table and slid it toward her. My voice was low, steady, without a tremor. "You should probably read the part where your name doesn't appear anymore." Her hands trembled as she ripped it open. She scanned the lines, her breathing turning jagged with every word. Everything I owned, the house, the savings, the farm money, had already been secured in a trust for my children and grandchildren. Ironclad. Untouchable. Not a cent under her name. I'd taken back everything she thought she'd already stolen. Samuel stood up, muttered something under his breath, and walked out. No loyalty. No goodbye. Just gone. Because greed has no spine. It only stands when it benefits. She stared at the door like she couldn't believe he'd left. Then she looked back at me, realizing this was never about love. It was about losing the power she thought she held. I leaned forward just slightly, my hands resting on the table. "I knew long before today," I said quietly. "I let you think you were winning. That was my gift to you. This is yours to live with now." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked under the weight of her own greed. She didn't just lose the house. She lost the story she thought she controlled. All without me raising my voice once. For a long moment, no one said a word. The room held its breath. The recorder had stopped playing, but her voice still echoed in the silence, clinging to the walls like smoke that didn't want to leave. Samuel's chair sat empty now, pushed back just enough to remind us how quickly a man built on greed can disappear. The doctor looked down at her folder, not out of judgment, but because she didn't want to witness the kind of unraveling that was happening across the table. She sat there pale, her hands still gripping the edges of the will, as if she could squeeze the words back into her favor. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She'd spent months weaving lies, layering them with a smile, thinking she could bend the truth to fit her plans. But the thing about truth is, it doesn't bend, it breaks through, even in silence. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't curse her name. I just leaned back in my chair and let the weight of the moment do what shouting never could. The quiet was louder than any fight. Her shoulders caved slowly, like the strength she'd worn so proudly had never been hers. I could see the exact second when the reality settled in, that everything she schemed for had slipped through her fingers, and the only person she could blame was herself. Justice didn't come with flashing lights or slamming doors. It came in the form of a signed will, a cold recording, and the unmistakable silence of someone who finally realizes the game is over. The power she thought she held had been pulled from beneath her feet long before she walked into this room. She just didn't know it. I stood up slowly, steady, not triumphant, but free. This wasn't revenge. This was balance being restored. My house, my name, my life, safe. Her voice, her greed, her lies, exposed, and all of it without me ever having to shout. As I walked past her, I paused at the door. She didn't look at me, not because she wouldn't, but because she couldn't. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. You learn a lot about people when you give them enough silence to reveal themselves. Some think silence means weakness, but I've learned it can be the sharpest weapon a man has. You don't always need to shout to be heard. Sometimes the quiet speaks louder than any storm. Betrayal isn't just about lies, it's about what you choose to ignore and what you finally decide to face. Respect is something you build with actions, not promises. Loyalty can't be faked forever. And truth waits. It doesn't rush. It just stands there, steady, until every mask falls. I didn't win today because I was clever. I won because I stayed patient, because I trusted that the truth didn't need my rage to make itself known. And it did exactly that, in its own time, in its own way. Thank you for sitting here with me tonight. I don't take it lightly that you've spent your time listening to an old man's story. Betrayal isn't an easy thing to talk about, but it's real. And sometimes the lessons we learn the hardest are the ones that keep us standing when the world shakes. If you've ever been in a moment where someone you trusted tried to take everything from you, your peace, your home, your name, then you understand how deep silence can run. I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent, let the truth reveal itself like I did, or would you have confronted them head-on? Tell me down in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if this story spoke to you, if it reached a part of you that's been hurt or healed or both, I hope you'll subscribe, share this story, and stick around. There are more truths, more lessons, and more stories to tell. Stay strong, stay wise, stay blessed.